Rowan opened his own barber shop. Shahaban began working as a cosmetologist in a salon. She performed cosmetic injections and laser facial treatments. The young woman was living her dream. She had always wanted to work in the beauty industry, and now her wish had come true. Just a year after the wedding, their marriage went downhill and the relationship became toxic. Shahaban seemed to remain a rebellious teenager, always looking for a reason to start a scandal. Now toward her husband, she behaved the same way she had with her parents when she lived under their roof. She was a manipulator and an intriguer. The woman could disappear without telling her husband where she was going. She could suddenly lash out at Rowan, slap him, and then take offense herself. There was one notable incident when Shahaban stormed into a bakery next to her husband's barber shop and started throwing pastries at Rowan. On top of that, Shahaban became incredibly jealous. She couldn't bear the thought that her husband was surrounded by women at work who in her mind were dying to ruin her marriage. She constantly screamed and cried about how she didn't trust her husband because of his alleged affairs, which, by the way, never existed. Shahaban was prone to dramatics, and over the years her theatrical tendencies only worsened. The pandemic began, and the couple was forced into isolation, spending 24 hours a day in the same space. One might think the relationship would deteriorate, but that didn't happen. When there were no external irritants, Shahaban calmed down a bit, and for a while everything was fine. But when the quarantine was lifted and restrictions were eased, 21-year-old Shahaban immediately took her driving test and bought her first car. It was a black Mercedes. As soon as the car entered her life, her relationship with Rowan began to fall apart completely. For Shahaban, it wasn't just a car. It symbolized freedom. The woman began disappearing from home even more often. Sometimes in the middle of the night, without saying a word, she would just get into her Mercedes and drive off. She could go anywhere and not return home. Shahaban repeatedly cheated on her husband with different men until she eventually got pregnant by one of them. At that time, the girl was 22, and the pregnancy came as a surprise to everyone involved. The details of the affair became known to Rowan, and now it was he who threw a fit. A serious argument erupted between the spouses, and the situation escalated by the minute. The man, as expected, was outraged by his wife's behavior, but she didn't care. Shahaban felt no emotions about it. She had no remorse, nothing, but it was she who attacked her husband with her fists, as if he had cheated on her. Of course, she was in the wrong, and this made her even more cruel toward her husband. The woman hit him on the head with a heavy object, smashed his face into a mirror with all her strength. Shahaban even tried to run him over with her beloved car. The self-absorbed woman, who never took responsibility, was furious because Rowan didn't want his wife to be pregnant by another man. It's unknown how it would have ended if Rowan's brother hadn't intervened and threatened Shahaban. He insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, and the woman finally gave in to her brother-in-law's demands. However, the tension in the relationship didn't subside. The emotional and physical abuse only continued to worsen. Shahaban now felt immense contempt, not only for her husband but also for her brother-in-law. She blamed him for having to get rid of the child. One day, the situation escalated so much that Shahaban grabbed a stun gun, burst into the relative's house, and shocked him in the neck. The brother-in-law collapsed to the floor, screaming while the aggressor just smiled widely and shouted maliciously, "Yes, yes." After this attack, Shahaban and Rowan's marriage fell apart completely. The man obtained a restraining order against his wife, and they began discussing separation. During the divorce process, Shahaban moved back in with her parents. However, her mother and father, who had desperately opposed her marriage to her chosen partner, were now against the divorce. They believed that if she parted ways with her husband, it would bring shame to their entire family. They worried that they would face public ostracism. People would turn away from them, so they insisted that the couple reconcile. Shahaban and Rowan's parents forced their children into a mediation process. The goal of marriage mediation is to help the parties resolve the conflict independently and reach a peaceful agreement. That is, not to divorce immediately but to try to work things out and stay together, or reach some kind of agreement. Both families were present at the process, and both were against the divorce. But emotions ran so high that Shahaban's father began threatening Rowan's father with violence. Everyone blamed each other until they came to the common conclusion that mediation had failed, and divorce was indeed the best solution in the situation. The couple simply had no ability or desire to stay together. Surprisingly, after the divorce, finding herself alone, Shahaban felt completely lost. She didn't know what to do or where to go because her parents didn't want her in their home, and she was divorced from her husband. Instead of renting an apartment, the woman simply lived in hotels, sometimes sleeping in her car, moving from place to place. She began hanging out in shady places and associating with risky people. Shahaban became addicted to illegal substances and engaged in unlawful activities. The divorced woman started committing petty thefts, stealing food and money from nearby stores, selling fake COVID-19 test certificates. There was even a time when she kept explicit images of minors on her phone. In short, the life of the once successful and happy girl spiraled into the abyss at breakneck speed. While associating with criminals, Shahaban told them stories about her tragic fate. She claimed that after the divorce, her ex-husband's family threatened to harm her, that Rowan was stalking and intimidating her. Naturally, it was all a pile of lies. There was no evidence that anyone had threatened her. Shahaban made it all up to gain pity and incite revenge. Fortunately, most of the men she seduced clearly understood what she was leading up to and categorically refused to take up arms and carry out retribution against her ex-husband's family. But eventually someone agreed to fulfill Shahaban's request, a man nicknamed Vulcan, and that's when the first criminal plan began to unfold. The main potential victim was none other than Rowan's brother. Shahaban still held a grudge against her husband's relative, blaming him for the loss of her child and wanting revenge. Vulcan, without asking unnecessary questions, said that killing the guy would be easier for him than blowing out a candle. For his work, he demanded 10,000 euros, 5,000 euros as an advance and 5,000 euros after the job was done. The client, in turn, demanded that the hitman show no mercy and send her photos of the deed as proof. Vulcan grabbed a gun and mimicked how he would send the future victim to the other side. So Shahaban paid Vulcan 5,000 euros in advance and sat waiting for good news, that her enemy was gone, that he had died in agony, begging for mercy. However, time passed and no photos were sent. In reality, Vulcan wasn't a hitman and had no intention of killing anyone. It was yet another scam by a petty crook. He had just swindled the woman out of 5,000 euros. After such a grandiose failure, Shahaban felt depressed, angry, and foolish, but she wasn't about to abandon her deadly plan. Now, she wanted to take an even more perverse path. Around the same time, Shahaban met a man named Shakir, her age. He was also 23 years old. Acquaintances described Shakir as a friendly and calm person, except when it came to white powder, as illegal substances made the guy very aggressive. He also had a particular weakness for the opposite sex. Shakir allowed women to bend him to their will, which Shahaban really liked. The young people hit it off instantly, and nights spent under the same blanket brought them even closer. After a few weeks of dating, the young woman brought up her favorite topic. Shahaban started spouting her usual nonsense about being in danger, that her ex-husband was stalking her and wanted to kill her, that his entire family was plotting to harm her. And then she asked Shakir if he was ready to commit a bloody crime for her sake. Wanting to impress her, the young man said yes. Only this time, Shahaban targeted her ex-husband himself. She didn't want to take his life. The woman decided to make it so that he and his family would regret how they treated her for the rest of their lives. In short, Shahaban wanted to stage her own death and frame her ex-husband, making it look like it was his doing. A more absurd plan was hard to imagine. Backhand index pointing right, midpoint CTA. This story is just getting darker. If you're still watching, you're clearly drawn in by the twists and emotion of this case. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell notification so you never miss a chilling story like this one. Now, Shahaban told Shakir that she wanted to run away with him somewhere far from her past and her family, who forced her to live by their rules. But to escape her aggressive and ruthless husband, she needed to make it look like she was dead. When Rowan went to prison for the murder of his ex-wife, Shahaban would be completely free. Years of torment and humiliation would finally end, and she could breathe freely next to her beloved. These were the fairy tales the woman told her new boyfriend at night. Shahaban came up with the brilliant idea of finding a dead body that looked exactly like her. Without thinking about the existence of DNA, the woman set out to find her doppelganger, kill her, and pin the blame on her ex-husband. And now the case took a mad and deadly turn. Over the next few weeks, Shahaban created a bunch of fake social media profiles just to find a girl who looked exactly like her. She scrolled through page after page of different strangers, comparing facial contours, body types, height, and weight. She tried to learn everything about these girls to find a more accurate copy of herself. Shahaban even wrote down a requirement, a small checklist that candidates had to meet. They had to be around 22 to 23 years old, about 160 to 170 centimeters tall with brown eyes, and no tattoos or distinguishing marks on their skin. In the end, Shahaban compiled a short list of people who, in her opinion, looked the most like her. Then she followed all the profiles of potential doppelgangers using fake accounts and struck up friendly correspondence with them. In reality, Shahaban had no intention of making friends. Her goal was to learn about the plans and dreams of her copies to later pull the right strings. It turned out that most of the girls on the short list desperately wanted to become influencers in the beauty industry or simply become famous. Shahaban decided to use this to her advantage and started posing as model agency directors and salon managers. The perpetrator invited young beauties to work for her. She had several different fraudulent schemes, but in most cases, Shahaban simply greeted them and introduced herself as some significant figure in the beauty industry, then invited the girls either as models or as clients for free cosmetic procedures at home for advertising purposes. Sometimes Shahaban promised substantial rewards or invited the girls to participate in a music video. It's clear that no money or videos were actually planned. She just needed to see them in person. For the most part, naive students unaccustomed to the attention of producers jumped at the chance to become famous, earn easy money, and fulfill their dreams. In total, Shahaban contacted about 20 candidates for the role of her doppelganger, and many of them were interested in the offer. However, upon learning that they would have to travel to Munich, most of the girls ultimately refused. Shahaban was on the verge of giving up. She was no longer so sure her plan would work, until one day she connected with a beauty blogger named Khadija from Heilbronn, located in the neighboring state of Baden-Württemberg. Khadija was 23 years old, the same age as Shahaban. The girl had a very difficult childhood. Khadija was born in Algeria, but after her parents' scandalous divorce, she immigrated to Germany with her father, leaving her mother in Algeria. She never saw her mother again. When the girl was 14, her father lost custody, and she was taken to an orphanage where she made many good friends. Soon, Khadija got her first boyfriend who turned out to be very cruel. Then, at a fairly young age, the girl became pregnant but ultimately lost the child. Later, she was subjected to harassment by an older man. In short, by the age of 23, she had experienced more pain than some people do in a lifetime. Despite the hardships she endured, Khadija didn't give up. She was described as a vibrant, cheerful, loving young woman. She was extremely loyal to her friends from the orphanage, whom she considered her sisters. At the time, Khadija worked as a waitress but dreamed of becoming the face of some cosmetics brand. She was obsessed with the beauty industry, followed famous beauty bloggers online, and even started posting her own tutorial videos on TikTok. In August 2022, a stranger posing as a music producer contacted Khadija and made a stunning offer to collaborate. The girl's life turned upside down in an instant. She couldn't even dream of such an opportunity. The only thing she didn't know was that Shahaban wasn't who she claimed to be. More precisely, the woman used one of her fake profiles with a different name. The offer for Khadija was as follows. She was invited to shoot a music video for Luna, a well-known German singer and rapper. This was a real musician, not just some randomly made-up character. Luna is a German singer and rapper. Her real name is Milan Ghafouri. She was originally from Iraqi Kurdistan and moved to Germany with her parents as refugees. Khadija couldn't believe her luck and did something Shahaban hadn't expected at all. She directly contacted Luna on social media and sent her a voice message asking about the music video shoot. To her surprise, Luna responded. The singer wrote that Kata had likely fallen victim to a scammer because no auditions for a music video were being held. By responding to the girl, Luna effectively saved her life. Unfortunately, Shahaban wasn't about to give up. Now, she wrote to Kata from another fake profile and tried to lure her into a different scam. This time, the woman offered a free laser procedure at her salon in exchange for posting reviews on social media. Shahaban used her usual scam targeting beauty influencers, and Kata fell for it again, thinking it was a great opportunity to gain fame. Shahaban explained in detail what needed to be done and gave the address of a real salon owned by her ex-husband, Rowan. Since Kata lived 160 kilometers from the salon, Shahaban was afraid the girl would refuse, so she promised to personally pick her up and take her to the location. The meeting was scheduled for August 16, 2022. The mastermind of the scam was staying with her parents at the time. Early in the morning, the woman put on a whole performance for her family, telling them she was going to meet her ex-husband, Rowan, to settle matters after the divorce. She promised to be home by lunch. Of course, it was all planned in advance. On August 16th, Shahaban set out very early. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she still hadn't returned. Not an hour later, not 2, not 3. By 10 o'clock in the evening, her parents grew worried. Their daughter had gone to meet her ex-husband in the morning, and there had been no calls or messages from her, though she promised not to be late. Relatives tried calling Shahaban and messaging her on social media, but there was no response. By 11 at night, her mother and father got into the car and headed to Rowan's house, her ex-husband, to find out where their daughter was and why she wasn't answering calls or messages. But on the way there, the parents noticed Shahaban's black car on one of the residential streets. It was their daughter's car, the one she had driven off in that morning for the meeting. They immediately rushed to the Mercedes to see what had happened. But through the heavily tinted windows, they could only make out a female body lying on the back seat, covered in blood. In a panic, the father tried to break the window with a stick he found, as the car was locked, but the dry branch broke on the first hit. Meanwhile, Shahaban's mother, with trembling fingers, called an ambulance and the police. Law enforcement officers arrived at the scene quickly and got to work. They managed to open the car, and that's when the parents' worst fears were confirmed, because their daughter Shahaban, lying on the back seat of her beloved Mercedes, was no longer breathing. The young woman had received over 50 stab wounds all over her body. Her face was particularly affected. It was completely disfigured. The arriving paramedics only confirmed the harsh reality. Shahaban was dead. Brain final CTA. This was one of the most chilling cases of manipulation and obsession we've ever covered. If you made it this far, you're truly committed to seeking justice and understanding the darkest corners of the human mind. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another real crime that sounds like a movie. Stay safe and see you in the next story.